Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most turbulent and fascinating periods in Israel's history, the era of the Judges. After the conquest of Canaan under Joshua's leadership, Israel faced a leadership vacuum and an unprecedented spiritual challenge. For approximately 350 years, between Joshua's death and the crowning of King Saul, God raised extraordinary leaders, known as judges, to deliver his people from foreign oppression. These men and women weren't judges in the modern legal sense, but rather military deliverers, spiritual leaders, and provisional rulers, chosen directly by God. Their stories are filled with courage, unshakable faith, and often deep human flaws. In them, we witness the recurring cycle of apostasy, oppression, repentance, and deliverance, a pattern that reflects the very nature of God's relationship with his people, even to this day. Join us on this journey through the stories of Othniel, Deborah, Gideon, Samson, and many others who, in times when everyone did what was right in their own eyes, stood as beacons of divine faithfulness and instruments of God's mercy to his chosen people. After years of conquering the Promised Land, Joshua, Israel's great leader and successor to Moses, had grown old and weary. He gathered all the people at Shechem for his final address, with a voice firm yet weakened by age. He reminded the Israelites of everything God had done for them and challenged them to remain faithful. In Joshua 24:14-15, we find his words, "Fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." The people responded enthusiastically, promising to serve the Lord alone. That day, Joshua made a covenant with them and established laws and ordinances. Shortly after, as recorded in Joshua 24:29, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. They buried him in the land of his inheritance, at Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim. With Joshua's death, Israel lost a great leader. There was no one to take his place, no one with the same authority and universal respect. It was as if a light had gone out, leaving Israel in darkness, without clear direction. While Joshua's generation was still alive, the people remained faithful. Joshua 24:31 tells us, "Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had seen all the great things the Lord had done for Israel." These elders had witnessed God's wonders. They had crossed the Jordan River on dry ground and seen the walls of Jericho fall. How could they forget such miracles? But time passed. A new generation grew up, and Judges 2:10 describes them as a generation who neither knew the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. They had not seen the Red Sea part. They hadn't eaten manna in the wilderness. They didn't witness the Jordan's waters stop flowing. To them, those were just old stories, tales told around the fire. While Joshua was alive, he had instructed the tribes to drive the Canaanites out completely. In Joshua 1:5, God had promised, "No one will be able to stand against you. I will give you every place where you set your foot." But after his death, the tribes began to relax. The book of Judges tells how they failed in their mission. Judges 1:21 records, "The Benjamites, however, did not drive out the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem." And in Judges 1:27, "But Manasseh did not drive out the people of Beth-shan, or Tanach, or Dor, or Ibleam, or Megiddo, and their surrounding settlements, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that land." Judges 1:28 adds, "When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely." It seemed like a practical solution. Why fight if you could coexist? Why expel the Canaanites when you could benefit from their labor? But it was a critical mistake, like slow-acting poison beginning to spread through Israel's body. a messenger of the Lord, brought a severe warning, recorded in Judges 2:1-3. I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land I swore to give to your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars. Yet you have disobeyed me. Why have you done this? Now therefore I tell you that I will not drive them out before you. They will become traps for you, and their gods will become snares to you. And that's exactly what happened. Living among the Canaanites, the Israelites began to adopt their customs, and worse, their gods. Judges 2:11-13 recounts, Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped various gods of the peoples around them. They aroused the Lord's anger because they forsook him and served Baal and the Ashtoreths. Baal was worshipped as the god of storms and fertility, an attractive deity to an agricultural people. Ashtoreth, or Asherah, was the fertility goddess, often symbolized by carved poles or trees. Worship of these gods involved ritual prostitution and other practices the God of Israel considered abominable. Thus began a cycle that would repeat itself many times during the era of the Judges. The first step, sin, Israel abandoned the Lord and turned to idols. In response, God handed them over to foreign oppressors. Judges 2:14 says, In his anger against Israel, the Lord gave them into the hands of raiders who plundered them. He sold them to their enemies all around, whom they were no longer able to resist. These oppressors stole their crops, attacked their towns, and often imposed heavy tributes. Under the weight of oppression, the people finally remembered God and cried out for help. Repentance was the third step in the cycle. In Judges 2:18 we read, Whenever the Lord raised up a judge for them, he was with the judge and saved them out of the hands of their enemies as long as the judge lived. For the Lord relented because of their groaning under those who oppressed and afflicted them. In his mercy, God responded by raising up a judge, a deliverer who rescued the people from the hands of their oppressors. These judges were not like modern-day judges who merely interpret and apply the law. They were military and civic leaders who ruled with God's authority. After deliverance, there was a time of peace while the judge lived. Judges 2:19 tells us what happened next. But when the judge died, the people returned to ways even more corrupt than those of their ancestors, following other gods and serving and worshipping them. They refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways, and so the cycle would begin again, a downward spiral of unfaithfulness and consequences. The first of these judges was Othniel, the nephew of Caleb. Caleb was one of the only two adults who left Egypt and were allowed to enter the Promised Land because of their faith. Even at age 85, Caleb asked Joshua for the hill country of Hebron as his inheritance, saying in Joshua 14:11, I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. That same warrior spirit was passed on to his nephew, Othniel. When Israel fell into idolatry, Judges 3:8 says, The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, so that he sold them into the hands of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram-Naharaim, to whom the Israelites were subject for 8 years. Cushan-Rishathaim means Cushan of double wickedness, hinting at his cruelty. He ruled Mesopotamia, the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, modern-day Iraq. For 8 long years, the Israelites suffered under his yoke, paying heavy tribute and living in fear. Eventually, weary from their suffering, Judges 3:9 tells us, But when they cried out to the Lord, he raised up for them a deliverer, Othniel son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, who saved them. Othniel had already proven his courage years earlier. When Caleb offered his daughter Achsah in marriage to whoever would capture Kiriath Sepher, it was Othniel who rose to the challenge and succeeded, as recorded in Judges 1:12-13. Now he would face an even greater challenge. Judges 3:10 tells us, "The Spirit of the Lord came on him, so that he became Israel's judge and went to war. The Lord gave Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram, into the hands of Othniel, who overpowered him." The Bible doesn't go into detail about the battle, but it makes it clear that victory came because the Spirit of the Lord was with Othniel. After Cushan-Rishathaim was defeated, Judges 3:11 records, "So the land had peace for 40 years, until Othniel son of Kenaz died." For 4 decades, Israel lived in peace and prosperity under Othniel's leadership, free from foreign attacks. But as soon as Othniel died, the Israelites quickly forgot the lessons they had learned and returned to worshipping Canaanite gods. Judges 3:12 says, "Again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and because they did this evil, the Lord gave Elon, king of Moab, power over Israel." Elon didn't act alone. Judges 3:13 explains, "Getting the Ammonites and Amalekites to join him, Elon came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the City of Palms." The City of Palms refers to Jericho, an important strategic location. For 18 years, the Israelites lived under Eglon's rule, paying heavy tribute. The situation seemed hopeless until God raised up a new deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, from the tribe of Benjamin. Ehud had an unusual trait. Judges 3:15 tells us he was left-handed. At the time, being left-handed was considered a handicap, since the right hand was seen as the hand of strength and skill. But God often uses people with apparent weaknesses to accomplish great things. Israelites sent Ehud to deliver the tribute to Elon, king of Moab. Before he went, Ehud prepared a daring plan. Judges 3:16 says, "Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit 18 inches long, which he strapped to his right thigh under his clothing." It was a clever move. Since Ehud was left-handed, he could draw the sword with his left hand, and since the weapon was hidden on his right thigh, the guards wouldn't notice it. Guards were used to checking the left side, where right-handed. People typically carried weapons. When Ehud arrived, he presented the tribute to Elon. Judges 3:17 describes the king as a very fat man. After handing over the tribute, Ehud dismissed the men who had accompanied him, but returned alone. Ehud said to the king, "I have a secret message for you, O king." Curious, Elon ordered everyone out of the room, remaining alone with Ehud. Judges 3:20 says, "Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, 'I have a message from God for you.' As Elon stood up, Ehud drew the sword with his left hand and plunged it into the king's belly. Judges 3:22 includes a vivid detail. Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. Ehud then escaped through the porch, closing and locking the doors behind him. When the servants returned and found the doors locked, they assumed the king was relieving himself. As Judges 3:25 recounts, they waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of the room, they took a key and unlocked them. There they saw their lord fallen to the floor, dead. While the servants hesitated, Ehud fled, passing through the area of stone idols and arriving in Sirah. There he sounded the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim and gathered an army of Israelites. Ehud told the people, as recorded in Judges 3:28, "Follow me, for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands." The Israelites followed him, seized the fords of the Jordan leading to Moab, and did not allow anyone to cross. At that time, they killed about 10,000 Moabites, all strong and able-bodied men. Not one escaped. Judges 3:30 concludes, "That day Moab was made subject to Israel, and the land had peace for 80 years. Under Ehud's leadership, Israel enjoyed 80 years of peace, the longest recorded period of tranquility during the era of the judges. After Ehud, a judge arose about whom we have very little information, Shamgar, son of Anath. His entire story is told in a single verse, Judges 3:31. After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an oxgoad. He too saved Israel. Though brief, this account reveals much about Shamgar. He faced the Philistines, one of Israel's most powerful and persistent enemies. The Philistines were a warlike people, equipped with iron weapons, advanced military organization, and fortified cities. And what weapon did Shamgar use? An oxgoad, a long pointed farming tool used to drive cattle during plowing. It wasn't a sword, nor a spear, nor a bow, just a simple, everyday tool in the hands of a man called by God. With this humble tool, Shamgar killed 600 Philistines. This demonstrates not only his courage and extraordinary strength, but also how God can use the ordinary to accomplish the extraordinary when it is placed in his hands. The brevity of Shamgar's record suggests that his time as judge may have been short or perhaps geographically limited, impacting only the region suffering from Philistine attacks. Still, the Bible honors him by declaring that he also saved Israel, placing him on par with the other judges God raised to deliver his people. Even in just a few words, Shamgar's story leaves us with a powerful lesson. God doesn't need large armies or sophisticated weapons to deliver his people. He can use anyone with whatever tool is available to fulfill his will and bring salvation. After Ehud's death, the Israelites once again did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. Without a leader to guide them, they forgot the one who had delivered them so many times and returned to idols. Like a father who disciplines those he loves, God allowed them to suffer the consequences of their choices. This time Judges 4:2 tells us, the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Hazor was a powerful city, and Jabin ruled with an iron fist. His commander Sisera had a crushing military advantage. The Canaanites had 900 iron chariots, terrifying war machines for that era. Imagine the fear they inspired as they advanced in formation, with giant wheels and armed warriors, ready to crush any resistance. For 20 long years, the Israelites lived under oppression, enduring extortion, watching their harvests plundered, and seeing their young taken to serve the oppressive king. The roads became deserted, as travel had become dangerous. Caravans stopped moving. In the midst of this darkness, a light began to shine, and that light came in the form of a woman. Verse 4 introduces this extraordinary leader. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. In a time and place where women rarely held positions of authority, God chose Deborah to be a judge over Israel. She was unique in every way. Deborah was a prophetess, someone who spoke God's word to the people, and the people trusted her wisdom. As verse 5 tells us, she held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. Picture the scene, a solitary palm tree on a hill, and under its shade, a woman carrying the hope of a nation. From all directions, people traveled to seek her counsel, to have disputes settled, and to hear God's word applied to complex situations. While men hid from Jabin, Deborah remained visible, courageous, a living reminder that God had not abandoned his people. One day, God spoke to Deborah, giving her a plan to deliver Israel. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh, in Naphtali in the north. When he arrived, Deborah delivered the divine command, recorded in verses 6 and 7. The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, Take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands." This was a bold command. Barak was being called to face the most feared commander in the region, someone with overwhelming military superiority. And what's more, he was being called by a woman, something quite uncommon in that culture. Barak's response reveals his hesitation. In verse 8, Barak says to Deborah, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go." Some see this as cowardice, others as prudence. Perhaps Barak was simply acknowledging that he needed the presence of God that Deborah represented. We don't know for sure, but we do know that Deborah accepted the challenge. "Certainly I will go with you," Deborah said in verse 9, "but because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours. For the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." This was a prophecy that would be fulfilled in a surprising way, but not in the way Barak might have imagined. With Deborah at his side, Barak found courage and summoned the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali. 10,000 men climbed with him to Mount Tabor, just as instructed. It was a strategic position. From the top of the mountain, they could see the enemy approaching and plan their attack. When Sisera learned that Barak had gone up Mount Tabor with an army, he gathered all his 900 iron chariots and all his troops and marched to the Kishon River. The chariots were his greatest advantage, deadly on flat terrain where they could maneuver freely. At the decisive moment, Deborah said to Barak, as recorded in verse 14, "Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" Trusting in Deborah's words, Barak went down Mount Tabor, followed by the 10,000 men. What followed was one of the clearest examples of divine intervention in a battle. Judges 5:21, part of the song Deborah would later compose to celebrate the victory, gives us a clue. The river Kishon swept them away, the age-old river, the river Kishon. It seems a sudden rainstorm turned the Kishon into a raging torrent, and the surrounding land into a muddy swamp. The dreaded iron chariots, the pride of Sisera's army, became useless. Their wheels got stuck in the mud, making them impossible to maneuver. The technological advantage of the Canaanites became their own trap. Judges 4:15 says, "The Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword, and Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot." The defeat was so complete that Sisera abandoned his chariot and ran for his life, while Barak pursued the chariots and the army all the way to Harosheth Hagoyim, destroying everything. Sisera ran for his life. He came to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. The Kenites were allies of the Canaanites, so Sisera thought he'd be safe there. Jael came out to meet him and said, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." Exhausted and desperate, Sisera entered. Jael covered him with a blanket, and when he asked for water, she gave him thick milk in a fine bowl, a luxury in those days. The warm, rich milk helped him relax. "Stand in the doorway of the tent," Sisera told Jael. "If someone comes by and asks if anyone is here, say no." Soon, overcome by exhaustion and the comfort of the milk, Sisera fell into a deep sleep. That's when Jael, Heber's wife, did something extraordinary. Verse 21 describes it. "But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died." When Barak arrived still, chasing Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said, "Come, I'll show you the man you're looking for." He went in with her and saw Sisera lying dead, the tent peg through his temple. Deborah's prophecy was fulfilled. The honor did not go to Barak, but to a woman. In fact, two women were the heroines of this story. Deborah, the spiritual leader, who inspired the uprising, and Jael, who ended Sisera's reign of terror with a boldness that made history. After the battle, Deborah and Barak composed a song, one of the oldest poems in the Bible, to celebrate the victory. In Judges 5, the song recounts how the tribes either gathered or failed to gather for battle, praises the courage of those who fought, and gives thanks to God for the triumph. In the song, Deborah describes herself as a mother in Israel, someone who not only leads but also loves and cares for her people. The final words of the song express a desire shared by all. So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. The victory of Deborah and Barak brought peace to Israel for 40 years. During that time, the people lived without fear, harvesting their crops, raising their children, in safety, and worshipping God in gratitude for their deliverance. But the cycle continued. After 40 years of peace, the Israelites once again did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. And God, faithful to the pattern he had established, allowed them to be oppressed. This time, the oppressors came from the east. Judges 6:1-2 says, "Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites." Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites made shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. The Midianites were desert nomads who used camels in their raids, a military innovation that gave them great mobility. They came like locusts in swarms too numerous to count. Along with the Amalekites and other eastern peoples, they invaded Israel during harvest time, set up camp, and destroyed the crops, leaving nothing for the Israelites to eat, not even sheep, oxen, or donkeys. Verse 6 describes the people's desperation. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. That was the beginning of repentance, the first step toward redemption. God, in his mercy, always responds to sincere cries for help. God's answer came through a prophet who reminded the people how he had delivered them from slavery in Egypt and given them the land. The prophet rebuked them for disobeying, for worshipping the gods of the Amorites. It was a hard message, but a necessary one. The problem wasn't the Midianites. It was Israel's unfaithfulness. That's when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon while he was threshing wheat in a winepress. Normally, wheat was threshed in an open, elevated place where the wind could carry away the chaff. But Gideon was doing it in a winepress, a pit used for crushing grapes, to hide the wheat from the Midianites. That shows the level of fear and oppression he was under. The angel sat under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, Gideon's father. When he saw Gideon, the angel said something surprising, recorded in verse 12. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon must have seemed anything but a warrior at that moment, hiding, afraid, just trying to secure food for his family. His response reveals doubt and even a touch of bitterness. "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." Without directly answering Gideon's questions, the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" Gideon's response revealed his humility and insecurity. "How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." Gideon didn't see himself as a leader or a warrior. He was the youngest son from an insignificant clan within a divided tribe. But God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. "I will be with you," the Lord replied, "and you will strike down the Midianites as if they were one man." This is one of the greatest promises in the Bible. God's presence overcomes every human weakness. Still uncertain, Gideon asked for a sign to confirm he was truly speaking with the Lord. He prepared an offering, a young goat and unleavened. bread and brought it to the angel. The angel told him to place the meat and bread on a rock and pour the broth over them. When Gideon obeyed, the angel of the Lord touched the offering with the tip of his staff, and fire rose from the rock, consuming everything. Then the angel vanished. Realizing he had seen the angel of the Lord face to face, Gideon feared he would die. But the Lord said to him, "Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. You will not die." Strengthened by the experience, Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and named it, "The Lord is Peace." That same night, the Lord instructed Gideon to tear down his father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. In its place, he was to build an altar to the Lord and offer a bull as a burnt sacrifice. Afraid to do it during the day because of his family and the townspeople, Gideon waited until nightfall. With the help of 10 of his servants, he tore down Baal's altar, cut down the Asherah pole, and built an altar to the Lord, offering the sacrifices commanded. In the morning, the people of the town discovered what had happened and demanded that Joash hand over his son to be put to death. But Joash defended Gideon with irrefutable logic. "Will you fight for Baal? Will you save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal is truly a god, let him defend himself. After all, it was his altar that was torn down." From that day on, Gideon was given a new name, Jerubbaal, meaning "let Baal contend with him," because he had challenged the pagan god. Soon after, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples gathered, crossed the Jordan, and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew the trumpet, summoning the Abizrites, his own clan, to follow him. He also sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they all rallied to his call. Still, seeking reassurance, Gideon asked God for another sign. In Judges 6:36-37, he said, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece, and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." And that is exactly what happened. Gideon rose early the next day, squeezed the fleece, and filled a bowl with water, while the ground around it remained dry. But Gideon asked for one more confirmation. This time, he asked that the fleece remain dry while the ground was covered with dew, and again God granted his request, confirming he was with him. Gideon then gathered his army, and 32,000 men responded to the call. It was an impressive number for an oppressed people, yet still small compared to the Midianites, who had so many men and camels that they could not be counted, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Judges 7:12. Surprisingly, God told Gideon his army was too large. In verse 2, the Lord explained, "You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her." God instructed Gideon to send home anyone who was afraid. 22,000 men left, leaving only 10,000. But still, the Lord said, "There are still too many." He told Gideon to take the men down to the water for a test. Those who lapped the water with their hands to their mouths would stay. Those who knelt to drink directly would be dismissed. Out of 10,000, only 300 drank from their hands. These were the warriors God chose, 300 against tens of thousands. It was an impossible ratio, and exactly the point. The victory would be by God's power, not human strength. That night, God told Gideon to go down to the Midianite camp. If he was afraid, he could take his servant Purah with him. In the camp, Gideon overheard a man telling a dream to another. "I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck a tent with such force that it overturned and collapsed." The other man replied, "This can be nothing but the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." Upon hearing this, Gideon worshipped God. Empowered by divine confirmation, returning to the Israelite camp, Gideon assembled his 300 men and divided them into 3 companies. He gave each man a trumpet and a jar with a torch inside. "Watch me," he told them. "Follow my lead. When I and those with me blow our trumpets, you do the same all around the camp and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" They approached the edge of the Midianite camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after the guard was changed. Suddenly, they blew their trumpets and broke the jars in their hands. Holding the torches in their left hands and the trumpets in their right, they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Each man stood his ground around the camp while the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the Midianites to turn on each other with their swords. The enemy fled to Beth-shittah toward Zererah, as far as the border of Abel-meholah near Tabbath. Gideon then summoned the men of Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, and they pursued the Midianites. He also sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites, and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them as far as Beth-barah." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they took control of the waters as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. The Midianite princes Oreb and Zeb were captured and killed. The Ephraimites brought their heads to Gideon across the Jordan. However, they complained that they hadn't been called earlier. Displaying diplomatic wisdom, Gideon replied, "What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim better than the full harvest of Abizar?" With this humble response, he soothed their anger. The victory was total. The Midianites, who had terrorized Israel for 7 years, were utterly defeated. And all of it came through a man who was hiding in a winepress to thresh wheat. Grateful for their deliverance, the Israelites asked Gideon to rule over them, and for his descendants to rule after him. But Gideon declined the honor, speaking words that reflected his loyalty to the true king of Israel. "I will not rule over you, nor will my son. The Lord will rule over you." However, Gideon asked for one request: a gold earring from the plunder of each man. Since the Midianites were Ishmaelites, they wore gold earrings. The men gladly spread out a cloak, and each threw in a gold earring from his share of the spoil. The weight of the gold came to 1,700 shekels, not including the ornaments, pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, nor the chains on their camels' necks. With this gold, Gideon made an ephod, a priestly garment, and placed it in his hometown of Ophrah. However, this creation became a snare to Gideon and his family, for all Israel prostituted themselves by worshipping it there, as recorded in Judges 8:27. Despite this failing, under Gideon's leadership, the land had peace for 40 years. The book of Judges also notes that Gideon had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. Additionally, his concubine, who lived in Shechem, bore him a son named Abimelech, meaning "my father is king," ironically a title Gideon had refused. Gideon lived to a ripe old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Sadly, as had happened before, no sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal-berith as their god and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. Nor did they show kindness to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, for all the good things he had done for Israel. After Gideon's death, his son Abimelech, born of his concubine in Shechem, saw a chance to claim the power his father had turned down. He went to Shechem to his mother's family and said, "Ask all the citizens of Shechem, which is better for you, to be ruled by all 70 of Jerubbaal's sons, or by one man. Remember, I am your own flesh and blood," as recorded in Judges 9:1-2. The people of Shechem were easily convinced. They gave him 70 pieces of silver from the temple of Baal-berith, which Abimelech used to hire reckless scoundrels who became his followers. According to verse 4, This band would become his private army for the atrocities to come. Abimelech then went to his father's home in Ophrah, and in one of the Bible's most brutal acts, he killed his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. Verse 5 ends with a faint glimmer of hope in the horror, but Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, escaped by hiding. With his brothers dead, Abimelech was proclaimed king beside the great tree at the pillar in Shechem. But he was no legitimate king. He was not chosen by God. He was a usurper, a murderer, who seized power through conspiracy and bloodshed. When Jotham heard about this, he climbed to the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted to the people of Shechem, telling them a parable about trees seeking a king. The useful trees, the olive, the fig, and the vine, refused the offer to rule, preferring to keep producing their fruit. In the end, the trees turned to the thorn bush, which accepted with a dark warning. If you really want to anoint me king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the thorn bush and consume the cedars of Lebanon. The message was sharp and clear. Abimelech was like the thorn bush, useless and dangerous, and if the people of Shechem didn't serve him loyally, he would destroy them. Jotham ended his message with a prophetic curse, saying that if the Shechemites had not acted honorably toward Gideon and his family, may fire come from Abimelech and consume them, and may fire come from them and consume Abimelech. Then he fled. To Beer, afraid of his brother, Abimelech ruled over Israel for 3 years, but just as Jotham had predicted, God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the people of Shechem, and they turned against him. Verses 23 and 24 explain why, so that the crime against the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might be avenged, and the guilt for their blood be laid on their brother Abimelech, who had murdered them, and on the citizens of Shechem, who had helped him kill his brothers. The Shechemites began to ambush travelers on the roads, and this was reported to Abimelech. Around this time, a man named Gal, son of Ebed, moved to Shechem with his relatives and won the trust of the townspeople. During the harvest festival at their temple, as they ate and drank, they cursed Abimelech. Gal openly stirred rebellion, saying, "Who is Abimelech and who is Shechem, that we should be subject to him? Isn't he Jerubbaal's son, and isn't Zebul his officer? Serve the descendants of Hamor, Shechem's founder. Why should we serve Abimelech?" Zebul, the governor of the city and loyal to Abimelech, heard Gal's words and was furious. He secretly sent messengers to Abimelech, warning him about the conspiracy and suggesting a plan of attack. That night, Abimelech and his entire army marched out and hid near Shechem, divided into 4 companies. The next morning, as Gal went out to the city gate, Abimelech and his men emerged from their hiding places. Gal saw them and said to Zebul, "Look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains." Zebul replied, "You're just seeing the shadows of the mountains. You're mistaking them for men." But Gal insisted, and Zebul finally revealed his true allegiance. "Where is your big talk now? You who said, 'Who is Abimelech that we should serve him?' Aren't these the very people you scorned? Go out and fight them." So Gal led the citizens of Shechem into battle against Abimelech, but was defeated, and many were wounded and fell as they fled all the way to the city gate. The next day, when the people went out into the fields, Abimelech was informed and seized the opportunity. He divided his men into 3 companies and set up an ambush. When he saw the people coming out of the city, he rose with his men and attacked. Abimelech and the company with him charged forward and took a position at the city gate, while the other 2 companies attacked everyone in the fields and slaughtered them. Abimelech attacked the city all day long. He captured it, killed all its inhabitants, and then completely destroyed it, scattering salt over its ruins as a sign that it should remain desolate forever. When the citizens of the Tower of Shechem heard what had happened, they fled to the stronghold of the temple of El-Berith. Upon learning that they were all gathered there, Abimelech and his men went up Mount Zalmon. He took an axe, cut a branch from a tree, and hoisted it onto his shoulder. Then he commanded his men, "Quick, do what you've seen me do." Each man cut a branch and followed Abimelech. They piled the branches against the stronghold and set it on fire with the people still inside. All those in the Tower of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. Abimelech's cruelty knew no bounds. He then moved on to Thebez, besieged the city and captured it, but there was a fortified tower in the middle of the city. All the men and women, all the city's citizens, fled to it, locked themselves inside, and climbed up to the tower's roof. Abimelech came to the tower to set it on fire, just as he had done in Shechem. But then something extraordinary happened. The fulfillment of Jotham's prophecy. Judges 9:53 says, "But a woman dropped an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and cracked his skull." Realizing he was dying, Abimelech quickly called his armor-bearer and said, "Draw your sword and kill me, so they can't say a woman killed me." So the young man ran him through, and he died. In his final moments, Abimelech's pride proved more important to him than his life. He couldn't bear the thought of being remembered as the man slain by a woman. When the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they each returned home. In this way, God repaid Abimelech for the evil he had done to his father by murdering his 70 brothers. And all of Jotham's curse, the son of Jerubbaal, came upon them. Abimelech is not counted among the judges of Israel. He was the opposite of a judge. Instead of delivering the people, he oppressed them. Instead of uniting the tribes, he caused division. Instead of leading them to worship God, he promoted idolatry. His story stands as a warning about the dangers of unchecked ambition and leadership without divine principles. After Abimelech's death, God raised up a man named Tola to deliver Israel. Judges 10:1-2 gives us some basic info about him. After Abimelech, Tola, son of Puah, the son of Dodo, from the tribe of Issachar, rose to save Israel. He lived in Shamir, in the hill country of Ephraim. He led Israel 23 years. Then he died and was buried in Shamir. The Bible doesn't give us details about Tola's deeds or the enemies he faced. We don't know how he delivered Israel or what specific challenges he encountered. What we do know is that after the chaos of Abimelech's reign, Tola brought stability. For 23 years he judged Israel, a substantial period of peace and order. Perhaps his greatest achievement was simply restoring normal life after Abimelech's terror. Sometimes the most valuable kind of leadership is the one that brings calm after the storm, the kind that allows people to live in peace, to plant and harvest, to raise their children, and to worship God without interference. After Tola came Jair from Gilead. Judges 10:3-5 tells us he was followed by Jair of Gilead, who led Israel 22 years. He had 30 sons, who rode 30 donkeys and controlled 30 towns in Gilead, which to this day are called Havoth Jair. When Jair died, he was buried in Carmon. Jair was from Gilead, a region east of the Jordan River, part of the land, given to the tribes of Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben. The fact that he had 30 sons suggests he was wealthy and held high status. In that culture, having many children was a sign of divine blessing and prosperity. Each son rode a donkey, another symbol of high social standing. Only people of elevated position rode donkeys, most people walked. On top of that, each son ruled over a town. These towns of Jair formed a kind of small, family-controlled network of city-states. The fact that these towns were still known as the villages of Jair at the time the book of Judges was written shows the lasting impact this judge had on his region. Jair led Israel for 22 years, offering yet another extended period of stability. Tola and Jair are often called minor judges, not because they were less important, but because the Bible gives fewer details about them. Together, they ruled for 45 years, almost half a century of relative peace and prosperity. Their leadership, though less dramatic than that of Gideon or Deborah, was just as valuable to the people. After Jair's death, the Israelites once again did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. They served the Baals, the Ashtoreths, and the gods of Aram, Sidon, Moab, the Ammonites, and the Philistines. They abandoned the Lord and no longer worshipped him. As a result of this unfaithfulness, the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he handed them over to the Philistines and the Ammonites. For 18 years, they cruelly oppressed all the Israelites living east of the Jordan in Gilead, the land of the Amorites. The Ammonites also crossed the Jordan to fight against Judah, Benjamin, and the tribe of Ephraim, bringing great distress to Israel. In their despair, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, saying, "We have sinned against you, for we have abandoned our God and served the Baals." God's response was direct and challenging. He reminded them of all the times he had delivered them in the past, from the Egyptians, Amorites, Ammonites, Philistines, Sidonians, Amalekites, and Maonites. "But you have forsaken me and served other gods," he said. "Therefore I will no longer save you. Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them save you when you are in trouble." Deeply remorseful, the Israelites confessed, "We have sinned. Do with us whatever seems good to you, but please rescue us now." Then they got rid of the foreign gods among them and served the Lord. And in Judges 10:16, the Bible records a moving line, "And he could bear Israel's misery no longer." Despite their repeated betrayals, God's heart turned toward his people in compassion when they truly repented. The Ammonites were mobilized and camped in Gilead, while the Israelites assembled at Mizpah. The leaders of Gilead were desperate for someone to lead the fight against the Ammonites. They declared, "Whoever takes the lead in attacking the Ammonites will be head over all who live in Gilead." It was at this critical moment that Jephthah emerged. His story begins under difficult circumstances. Judges 11:1-2 tells us, "Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His mother was a prostitute. His father was Gilead. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when they were grown, they drove Jephthah away, saying, 'You will not get any inheritance in our family because you are the son of another woman.' Rejected by his half-brothers and cast out of his father's house, Jephthah fled to the land of Tob. There he gathered around him a group of adventurers who followed him on his expeditions. He became a kind of mercenary leader, his skill in battle recognized, though his background was scorned. When the Ammonites attacked Israel, the leaders of Gilead went to Tob to find Jephthah. "Come," they said, "be our commander so we can fight the Ammonites." Jephthah's reply revealed the depth of his pain. "Didn't you hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you're in trouble?" But the leaders pleaded, "Nevertheless, we are turning to you now. Come with us, fight the Ammonites, and you will be head over all who live in Gilead." Jephthah set a condition. "If I go back with you to fight the Ammonites and the Lord gives them to me, will I really be your head?" The leaders agreed. "The Lord is our witness. We will certainly do as you say." Before heading into battle, Jephthah tried to resolve the conflict diplomatically. He sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites asking, "What do you have against us that you have attacked our land?" The king replied that Israel had taken their land when they came up from Egypt, from the Arnon to the Jabbok and the Jordan. Now return it peacefully. Jephthah responded with a lengthy historical account explaining that Israel had not taken the land of Moab or the Ammonites. When the king of Edom denied passage, Israel went around. The same happened with Moab. Upon reaching the Amorite territory, Israel asked King Sihon for passage. He refused and attacked. The Lord gave Sihon and all his men into Israel's hands. and they took possession of the entire land of the Amorites, from the Arnon to the Jabbok, and from the wilderness to the Jordan. Jephthah argued that if the Lord had driven out the Amorites and given the land to Israel, why did the Ammonites believe they had any claim to it? Shouldn't you take what your God Chemosh gives you? So we will take what the Lord our God has given us. He concluded with a pointed question. Are you better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever quarrel with Israel or fight them? Israel had lived in Heshbon, Aroer, and the surrounding towns, and in all the cities along the Arnon for 300 years. Why didn't you recover them during that time? I have not wronged you, Jephthah said, but you are doing me wrong by making war against me. Let the Lord, the judge, decide the dispute this day between the Israelites and the Ammonites. But the king of the Ammonites paid no attention to Jephthah's message. Diplomacy had failed. War was now inevitable. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. He crossed through Gilead and Manasseh, passed through Mizpah of Gilead, and advanced against the Ammonites. Before the battle, Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. It was a rash and unnecessary vow. God had already promised to deliver the Ammonites into Israel's hands after their repentance. Jephthah's faith, though real, was mixed with pagan practices, foreign to true worship of God. Jephthah advanced against the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from Aroer to the vicinity of Minnith, and as far as Abel-keramim. Thus the Ammonites were subdued before the Israelites. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him, dancing to the sound of tambourines? His daughter, his only child. He had no other son or daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried out, "Oh, my daughter, you have brought me down, and I am devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." "My father," she replied, "you made a promise to the Lord. Do to me just as you vowed, now that the Lord has avenged you against your enemies, the Ammonites." Then she asked, "But grant me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry." After 2 months she returned to her father, and he fulfilled the vow he had made concerning her. The Bible does not explicitly describe what happened, sparking debate among scholars. Some believe Jephthah actually sacrificed his daughter, an act abhorrent to God. Others suggest she was dedicated to lifelong service at the tabernacle, remaining a virgin for the rest of her life, which would explain the mourning over never marrying. In either case, Jephthah's vow led to personal tragedy amid national victory. From that time on, a tradition arose in Israel. Every year, young Israelite women would go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. Jephthah's victory should have united Israel, but soon internal conflict arose. The men of Ephraim, feeling left out, crossed the Jordan and confronted Jephthah. "Why did you go to fight the Ammonites without calling us to go with you? We're going to burn down your house with you in it." Jephthah responded that he had indeed called upon the Ephraimites, but they did not come to help. Seeing no other choice, he and his people risked their lives to face the Ammonites, and the Lord delivered them. "So why have you come today to fight me?" he asked. Tensions escalated into armed conflict. Jephthah assembled the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. The Gileadites seized the fords of the Jordan leading back to Ephraim. When an Ephraimite fugitive said, "Let me cross," the Gileadite men would ask, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he said no, they would say Shibboleth. If he said Sibboleth, unable to pronounce it correctly, they seized and killed him on the spot at the Jordan crossings. 42,000 Ephraimites died on that occasion. Jephthah led Israel for 6 years. When he died, he was buried in his town in Gilead. After Jephthah's death, Israel entered a time of relative peace under 3 judges, Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. Their stories are brief, like small windows into a period of calm before the coming storms. The book of Judges tells us in chapter 12, verse 8, after Jephthah, Ibzan of Bethlehem led Israel. Ibzan was from Bethlehem, though it's unclear whether this was Bethlehem in Judah to the south or the Bethlehem in the territory of Zebulun to the north. What is clear is that he was a man of considerable influence and wealth. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters. He gave his daughters in marriage to men outside his clan and brought in 30 young women from outside for his sons. Imagine a family like that, 60 children growing up together, playing, learning, developing, and then 30 arranged. Marriages carefully planned to forge ties with other families and clans. These weren't just personal decisions, they were political ones. By arranging marriages with outsiders, Ibzan was creating a network of alliances that promoted peace and stability in Israel. Each son-in-law and daughter-in-law represented a connection to another group, a reason to cooperate rather than fight. Ibzan led Israel for 7 years. When he died, he was buried in Bethlehem. We have no record of major battles or crises during his leadership, which in itself speaks volumes about his effectiveness. Sometimes the greatest sign of good leadership is what doesn't happen. No war, no famine, no chaos. After Ibzan came Elon from the tribe of Zebulun. Verse 11 simply says, after him, Elon the Zebulunite led Israel for 10 years. The tribe of Zebulun occupied land in the north, near the Sea of Galilee, a region known for trade and agriculture. We know nothing about Elon's character or deeds, only that he gave Israel a decade of leadership. When Elon died, he was buried in Ajalon, in the territory of Zebulun. The book of Judges mentions no legacy or achievements, but the fact that he governed for 10 years suggests a period without major upheavals. Often, the most effective leaders are the ones we hear the least about. Not because they did nothing, but because they kept things running so smoothly that there was no crisis worth recording. After Elon came Abdon, son of Hillel from Pirathon. The biblical text gives us a few interesting details in verses 13 to 15. Abdon, son of Hillel from Pirathon, led Israel after him. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, who rode on 70 donkeys. He led Israel for 8 years. Then Abdon, son of Hillel, died and was buried at Pirathon in Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. Like Ibzan, Abdon had a large and prosperous family, 40 sons and 30 grandsons, and all of them rode 70 donkeys, a sign of high status and wealth. In that culture, riding a donkey was a privilege reserved for the elite. Most people traveled on foot. Pirathon, his hometown, was in Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. This suggests the area once belonged to Israel's traditional enemies and had since become part of Ephraim's inheritance. Abdon led Israel for 8 years. Like his 2 predecessors, we have no record of wars or internal conflict during his rule. It seems Israel enjoyed about 25 years of relative peace under these 3 judges, a precious period of rest before the coming storms. While the central and northern parts of Israel enjoyed peace under Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon, the Ikidsa south faced a growing threat, the Philistines. This warlike people, likely originating from the Aegean Sea, had settled along Canaan's coast and were constantly pressing into Israelite territory. It was in this context that one of the most well-known and controversial judges was born, Samson. The story begins with a promise. In the book of Judges, chapter 13, verses 2 and 3, we read, "A certain man of Zorah, named Manoah from the tribe of Dan, had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, 'You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son." Barrenness was considered a deep sorrow in Israelite culture, where children were seen as the greatest blessing from God. The promise of a child to a barren woman was already extraordinary, but the angel went further, giving very specific instructions. "Now, see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." The angel was making it clear this would be no ordinary child. He would be a Nazirite, someone specially consecrated to God. Most Nazirites made a temporary vow, but Samson would be a Nazirite from birth, for life. The Nazirite vow had 3 key components: not cutting one's hair, abstaining from wine or any fermented drink, and avoiding contact with corpses or anything unclean. Samson's mother was to observe some of these restrictions during her pregnancy to prepare her son for his consecrated life. The woman ran to tell her husband about the mysterious visitor and his astonishing message. Manoah prayed, asking for the man of God to return and give more instructions on how to raise the boy. God answered his prayer, and the angel appeared again to the woman while she was out in the field. She quickly ran to get her husband. When Manoah arrived, he asked the angel, "When your words are fulfilled, what is to be the rule that governs the boy's life and work?" The angel of the Lord answered, "Your wife must do all that I have told her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, nor drink any wine or other fermented drink, nor eat anything unclean. She must do everything I have commanded." Still not realizing he was speaking to an angel, Manoah wanted to offer him a young goat. The angel declined the meal, but suggested that Manoah offer a burnt offering to the Lord instead. As the flame from the altar rose toward heaven, the angel ascended in the fire, finally revealing his divine nature. Manoah and his wife fell face down, in awe. "We are surely going to die," Manoah said to his wife, "because we have seen God." But she, showing a clearer faith, replied, "If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and grain offering from our hands, nor shown us all these things or told us this." The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son, whom she named Samson. The boy grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. That phrase, "the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him," will appear several times in Samson's story, always before an act of extraordinary strength. It's a reminder that his power didn't come from himself, but from God. As Samson grew up, he saw a Philistine woman in Timnah and wanted to marry her. His parents were deeply displeased. "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives, or among all our people?" they asked. "Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson insisted, "Get her for me. She's the one I want." The text adds an interesting note in verse 4. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. God would even use Samson's questionable choices to fulfill his purposes. On the way to Timnah, something remarkable happened. A young lion came roaring toward Samson. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. He did this without any weapon, using only his supernatural strength, and he told no one, not even his parents. Sometime later, when Samson returned to Timnah for the wedding, he left the road to look at the lion's carcass. To his surprise, a swarm of bees had made a hive inside the dead body, and there was honey. Samson scooped it out with his hands, ate some, and gave some to his parents, without telling them where it came from. At the wedding feast, which lasted 7 days, Samson proposed a riddle to the 30 Philistine companions assigned to him. Out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. The wager, 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if they couldn't solve it, they'd owe him the same. After 3 days of failure, the Philistines threatened Samson's bride. "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we'll burn you and your father's household to death." Under pressure, she wept before Samson throughout the rest of the feast, saying, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." On the 7th day, he finally told her, and she immediately passed the answer to her people. Before sunset, the Philistines said to Samson, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Realizing the betrayal, Samson replied, bitterly, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Again, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 men, took their clothes, and gave them to those who had explained the riddle. Furious, he returned to his father's house, and his bride was given to one of his companions. Sometime later, during the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife, bringing a young goat. "I'm going to my wife's room," he said. But her father wouldn't let him in. "I was so sure you hated her," he explained, "that I gave her to your companion. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead." Enraged, Samson declared, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." He caught 300 foxes, tied them tail to tail in pairs, fastened a torch to each pair, lit the torches, and released them into the Philistines' grain fields. The fire burned up the sheaves, the standing grain, and even the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines found out who was responsible and why, they burned Samson's wife and her father to death. Samson vowed, "Since you acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously, killing many, and then took refuge in a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines invaded Judah and camped at Lehi. When the men of Judah asked why they were attacking, they replied, "We've come to tie up Samson and do to him what he did to us." 3,000 men from Judah went to the cave and said to Samson, "Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? What have you done to us?" "I only did to them what they did to me," Samson replied. "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines," they told him. Samson made them swear not to kill him themselves, and then he allowed them to tie him up with 2 new ropes and take him to the Philistines. When they arrived at Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. But in that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Seeing a donkey's jawbone on the ground, Samson grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. After the slaughter, Samson was overcome with thirst and cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Then God opened up a hollow place in Lehi, and water flowed from it. Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. Samson led Israel for 20 years during the time of Philistine rule. His next episode took him to Gaza, where he spent the night with a prostitute. When the people of Gaza learned he was there, they surrounded the place and waited for him at the city gate, planning to kill him at dawn. But Samson got up at midnight, tore loose the city gates along with their posts and bars, hoisted them onto his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill facing Hebron, a feat of superhuman strength, lifting what would take several men to even budge. Samson's weakness for women eventually led to his downfall. He fell in love with Delilah from the valley of Sorek. The Philistine rulers approached her and said, "See if you can seduce him and learn the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him. Then we can tie him up and subdue him. Each of us will give you 1,100 silver coins." 3 times Delilah asked Samson for the secret to his strength, and 3 times he lied. First, he said that new ropes never used before would weaken him. Then he claimed fresh leather cords would do the trick. Finally, he said if his 7 braids were woven into a loom, he'd lose his strength. Each time, Delilah tested his claim while he slept, and the Philistines waited to pounce, but each time Samson easily broke free. Eventually, after she pressed him day after day to the point that he was sick to death of her nagging, Samson gave in. "No razor has ever touched my head," he confessed, "because I have been a Nazirite, set apart to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." Delilah knew he had. Finally told her the truth. She summoned the Philistine rulers, who brought the promised silver. While Samson slept on her lap, she called a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. With that, his strength left him, and she began to subdue him. Then she shouted, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He woke up thinking, "I'll escape like before and shake myself free." But he didn't know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him to Gaza. There they bound him with bronze shackles and put him to work grinding grain in prison. But his hair began to grow back. The Philistine rulers gathered to offer a great sacrifice. To their god Dagon, they rejoiced, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." When the people saw Samson, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has handed over our enemy, the one who laid waste to our land and killed so many of us." During the celebration, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they brought him from prison, and he performed for them. They placed him between the pillars. Samson said to the servant leading him by the hand, "Place me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so I can lean against them." The temple was crowded with men and women. All the Philistine rulers were there, and about 3,000 people were on the roof, watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "O sovereign Lord, remember me. O God, please strengthen me just once more. Let me with one final blow take revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." He reached out for the 2 central pillars supporting the temple. Placing his right hand on one and his left on the other, he cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and the temple collapsed on the rulers and all the people in it. In his death, he killed more than he had during his entire life. His brothers and his father's family came to retrieve his body. They buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father Manoah. He had led Israel for 20 years. While Samson battled the Philistines in the south, another leader emerged in Israel, Eli, a priest who also served as a judge. This was an unusual combination. Judges were usually military leaders, while priests handled religious duties. Samuel, chapter 1, introduces Eli as an old man, sitting in a chair by the entrance of the Lord's tabernacle at Shiloh. For 40 years he had served both as priest and judge, a life devoted to God and his people. Shiloh was a sacred place. It housed the tabernacle, the holy tent that contained the Ark of the Covenant, the most powerful symbol of God's presence among his people. As high priest, Eli was the guardian of this spiritual treasure. One day, Eli saw a woman praying so intensely that her lips moved, but no sound came out. It was Hannah, who was suffering deeply because she couldn't have children. She was pleading with God for a son. Eli thought she was drunk and rebuked her. "How long will you stay drunk? Get rid of your wine." Hannah replied, "It's not that, my lord. I am a woman deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or any fermented drink. I was pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." Eli was moved by her sincerity and said, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." And God heard Hannah's prayer. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, Samuel. When the boy was weaned, Anna brought him to the tabernacle at Shiloh and gave him to Eli to be raised in the service of the Lord, just as she had promised. As young Samuel grew up in the tabernacle, serving the Lord under Eli's guidance, something troubling was taking place. Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who were also priests, did not honor God. The text in 1 Samuel 2:12 is blunt. Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. They abused their position, taking the best portions of the sacrifices before they were offered to God. When anyone protested, they threatened to take the meat by force. On top of that, they were sleeping with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting, desecrating the sacred place. Time after time, Eli heard about his son's actions and rebuked them. "Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about your wicked deeds. No, my sons, the reports I hear spreading among the Lord's people are not good." But his reprimand was weak, and his sons paid no attention. One day, a man of God came to Eli with a stern message. He reminded Eli that God had chosen his ancestor Aaron's family to be priests and had blessed them greatly. Then he asked, "Why do you scorn my sacrifices and offerings that I commanded for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choicest parts of every offering made by my people Israel?" The message carried a dreadful warning. God would cut off the strength of Eli's household, and no one in his family would reach old age. His two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, would die on the same day, and God would raise up for himself a faithful priest who would act according to God's heart and mind. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel continued to grow and found favor with both the Lord and the people. One night, as he was sleeping near the ark of God in the tabernacle, he heard a voice calling his name. Thinking it was Eli, he ran to the elderly priest and said, "Here I am. You called me?" Eli said he hadn't called and sent him back to bed. This happened 3 times. On the 3rd time, Eli realized it was the Lord calling the boy and instructed him, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" When the Lord came once more and called, "Samuel, Samuel," the boy responded just as Eli had taught him, and God gave Samuel a message that would make the ears of all who heard it tingle, a confirmation of the judgment against Eli's house. "On that day I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke concerning his family, from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons made themselves contemptible, and he did not restrain them." In the morning, Samuel was afraid to tell Eli the vision, but the old priest insisted, and Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing. Eli accepted the judgment humbly. "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." Time passed, and Samuel grew. The Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. All Israel recognized that Samuel was confirmed as a prophet of the Lord. The situation with the Philistines worsened, and Israel went to war against them. In the first battle, the Philistines defeated Israel, killing about 4,000 men. The leaders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat upon us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Shiloh, so that it may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies." So the people sent men to Shiloh, and they brought back the ark of the covenant of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim. And Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, came with the ark of the covenant of God. When the ark arrived at the camp, all Israel shouted so loudly that the ground shook. The Philistines heard the uproar and were afraid. "A god has come into the camp. Woe to us, nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us, who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods?" They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. Even though they were afraid, the Philistines encouraged one another. Be strong, Philistines. Be men, or you will become slaves to the Hebrews as they have been to you. Be men and fight. The Philistines fought, and Israel was once again defeated, this time even more severely. 30,000 Israelite soldiers were killed, the Ark of God was captured, and Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. The prophecy against Eli's household was being fulfilled. A man from the tribe of Benjamin fled the battlefield and arrived in Shiloh that same day, with his clothes torn and dust on his head, a sign of deep mourning. Eli was sitting on his chair by the road, watching, for his heart feared for the Ark of God. When the messenger entered the town and delivered the news, a great outcry arose. Eli, now 98 years old and blind, heard the commotion and asked what was happening. The messenger hurried to tell him, "I have just come from the battlefield. I fled today." Eli asked, "What happened, my son?" The messenger answered, "Israel fled before the Philistines, and the army suffered great losses. Your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the Ark of God has been captured." When he mentioned the Ark of God, Eli fell backward off. His chair by the city gate broke his neck and died, for he was old and heavy. He had led Israel for 40 years. The tragedy didn't end there. Eli's daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant and near the time of delivery. When she heard the news that the Ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law and husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth to a son. As she was dying, the women attending her said, "Don't be afraid, you have given birth to a boy." But she did not respond. In her final moments, she named the boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel," because the Ark of God had been captured and because of the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband. And so ended Eli's time as priest and judge, with Israel's defeat, the death of his sons, the loss of the ark, and his own tragic demise. Despite his personal devotion, his failure to discipline his sons brought disastrous consequences upon the entire nation. As Eli's household came to an end, God was preparing a new leader for Israel, Samuel, the boy Hannah had dedicated to the Lord's service. As we've seen, Samuel grew up in the tabernacle, learning to hear the voice of God from a very young age. After the ark was captured and Eli died, Samuel likely returned to his hometown Ramah. There, he waited and watched as the Philistines suffered because of the ark's presence among them. The Lord afflicted the Philistines with tumors, first in Ashdod, then in Gath, and finally in Ekron. In every city where the ark was taken, a terrible disease struck the people. After 7 months, the Philistines decided to return the ark to Israel along with a guilt offering, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, representing the 5 rulers of the Philistines. The ark was placed on a new cart pulled by 2 cows that had just calved. If the cows made their way to Israel, it would be a sign that the Lord's hand had been behind their suffering. The cows went straight to Beth Shemesh in Israel, not veering to the right or to the left. For 20 years, the ark remained in Kiriath Jearim in the house of Abinadab. During that time, 1 Samuel 7:2-3 tells us, "All the people of Israel mourned and sought after the Lord. Then Samuel said to all the Israelites, 'If you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths among you. Commit yourselves to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines.'" Samuel's words moved the people. They got rid of their Baals and Ashtoreths and began to serve the Lord alone. Samuel said, "Assemble, all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you." They gathered at Mizpah, drew water, and poured it out before the Lord. That day they fasted and confessed, "We have sinned against the Lord." When the Philistines heard that, the Israelites had assembled at Mizpah. They prepared to attack them. The Israelites were afraid and said to Samuel, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines." Samuel offered a lamb as a burnt offering and cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. While Samuel was offering the sacrifice, the Philistines approached to battle Israel. But the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines that day, throwing them into such confusion that they were routed before Israel. The men of Israel pursued the Philistines from Mizpah to Beth-kar, striking them down along the way. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." So the Philistines were subdued and did not invade Israelite territory again. The Lord's hand was against the Philistines throughout Samuel's lifetime. The towns the Philistines had taken were restored to Israel, from Ekron to Gath, and there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. Samuel continued to serve as judge over Israel all the days of his life. He established a circuit, traveling each year from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. But he always returned to Ramah, where his home was, and there he also judged Israel. And he built an altar to the Lord there. But Samuel's leadership went beyond legal matters. He also established schools for prophets. These were communities where young men learned God's laws and how to worship him properly. Under Samuel's leadership, a genuine spiritual revival took place in Israel. However, as Samuel grew old, new problems arose. He appointed his sons, Joel and Abijah, as judges in Beersheba. Unfortunately, they did not follow their father's example. They pursued dishonest gain, accepted bribes, and perverted justice. It echoed the very issue that had plagued Eli, sons who failed to live up to their father's integrity. The elders of Israel gathered and went to Samuel at Ramah. They voiced two concerns. "You are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." This request displeased Samuel, and he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord said to him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until now, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights." Samuel relayed all the Lord's words to the people who were asking for a king. He warned them about what a king would demand. He would take their sons for his army and their daughters to serve in his palace. He would claim the best of their lands. He would demand 1/10 of their crops and livestock, and eventually they would become his slaves. "When that day comes," Samuel warned, "you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." But the people refused to listen to Samuel. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." After hearing everything the people said, Samuel repeated their words to the Lord. The Lord replied, "Listen to them and appoint a king for them." So Samuel said to the men of Israel, "Go back to your towns." There was a man from the tribe of Benjamin named Kish, his son. Saul was a tall and handsome young man. No one in Israel surpassed him in appearance. One day, Kish's donkeys went missing, and he sent Saul to look for them. After a long and fruitless search, Saul and his servant decided to seek the seer, as prophets were called in those days, in the nearby town. They didn't know it yet, but that seer was Samuel. The day before, the Lord had revealed to Samuel, "Tomorrow at this time, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him as the leader of my people Israel. He will deliver them from the hand of the Philistines. I've looked upon my people, for their cry has come to me." When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said, "This is the man I spoke to you about. He will rule over my people." Saul approached Samuel and asked where the seer's house was. Samuel replied, I am the seer. Go ahead of me to the high place, for you will dine with me today. Tomorrow morning I will send you on your way and tell you everything that is on your heart." Samuel invited Saul to a banquet, gave him the place of honor, and had a special portion of meat set aside for him. After returning to town, Samuel and Saul talked on the roof of the house. Early the next morning, Samuel called Saul to send him on his way. As they were leaving the city, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to go ahead, but stay here for a moment, for I have a message from God for you." Samuel took a flask of oil, poured it on Saul's head, and kissed him, saying, "The Lord has anointed you ruler over his inheritance." Then Samuel told Saul about the signs he would encounter on the way, confirming his anointing. Everything happened exactly as Samuel had foretold. Later, Samuel summoned the people to gather before the Lord at Mizpah. There, he reminded them how God had delivered Israel from Egypt and from all the kingdoms that had oppressed them. "But today," Samuel said, "you have rejected your God, who saves you out of all your disasters and distress. And you said, 'No, appoint a king over us.'" Samuel then had the tribes of Israel come forward before the Lord, and the tribe of Benjamin was chosen. Then the clans of Benjamin stepped forward, and the Matrite clan was chosen. Finally, Saul, son of Kish, was chosen. But when they looked for him, he was nowhere to be found. The Lord said, "Yes, he is hiding among the baggage." They ran and brought him out. As he stood among the people, he was taller than anyone else, head and shoulders above them all. Samuel said, "Look at the man the Lord has chosen. There is no one like him among all the people." Then all the people shouted, "Long live the king!" Samuel explained the rights and duties of kingship to the people and wrote them down on a scroll, which he placed before the Lord. Then he sent everyone home. Throughout Saul's reign, Samuel remained a prophet and advisor. On one occasion, Saul offered a burnt offering without waiting for Samuel, as he had been instructed. Samuel rebuked him. "You acted foolishly. You did not keep the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." On another occasion, when Saul spared King Agag of the Amalekites and kept the best of the livestock, disobeying a direct order from God, Samuel confronted him again. "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying his word? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams, for rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." Samuel was deeply grieved by Saul's disobedience, but the Lord said to him, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem, for I have chosen one of his sons to be king." Samuel went to Bethlehem and anointed David, Jesse's youngest son, as the future king. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day forward. This marked the beginning of the transition from the period of the judges to the monarchy in Israel. Samuel, who had dedicated his life to God from childhood in the tabernacle, became the last judge of Israel and the prophet who anointed the first two kings of the nation. Samuel remained a moral and spiritual authority until his death. When he died, all Israel gathered and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. His legacy as the last of the judges, the restorer of faith in Israel, and the founder of the monarchy endured long after his death, and he is mentioned in the Psalms as one who called on the name of the Lord. Thus ended the era of the judges, and began the monarchy in Israel, with Saul anointed as the first king, followed by David, a man after God's own heart. Dear friend, we've reached the end of this fascinating journey through the time of the judges an era of great contrasts where we saw extraordinary leaders who, despite their flaws, were used by God to deliver his people. From Deborah to Samuel, we witnessed how God is always ready to raise up deliverers when his people cry out to him. We saw how unfaithfulness leads to oppression, but sincere repentance opens the door to divine deliverance. If this story touched your heart and you'd like to keep learning about the incredible narratives of the Bible, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Click the subscribe button now and turn on notifications to be alerted about our next videos. Do you know someone who would also benefit from these stories? Share this video with friends and family. Together, we can spread God's word and its timeless lessons. Thanks for watching until the end. See you in the next episode of our Bible story series.